packaging material in the pharmacy, and we looked at different types of packaging material. Okay, what is packaged in the industry, and the packaging material that is used in the pharmacy. And by looking at the packaging material, what you need to know about the product. Okay, there are some packaging materials that indicate that this product, once it is opened, all the product is either used or whatever remains is discarded because sterility is compromised once the product is opened. So we looked at all those types of packaging material, and I believe this is the slide we ended on before we took a break. We were looking at requirements for packaging material. Remember, these requirements, as much as usually they will be studied during drug development, it's important for you as a pharmacist in the pharmacy to be aware of this, because as we said, if you look at, if you get a product that has been packaged in a certain package, that package is telling you something. For instance, a product that has been packaged in an amber-colored bottle, it is telling you that whatever is contained in that bottle is actually sensitive to light. Okay? So if you're going to repackage it in another package, it's important that you actually consider this and ensure that the package you use, okay, to repackage actually is able to maintain the conditions that the manufacturer intended, okay? If you find a package that has been packaged in a material, for instance, like this tropicalized pack, that tells you that this product is sensitive to moisture, okay? And the reason why this manufacturer actually used a tropicalized pack was to actually add a second layer of protection. Because remember we said this product is actually, you have the tablets or the capsules packaged in a blister pack, and in addition to the blister pack, you add a second layer of aluminum foil to increase protection from moisture, okay? So requirements for packaging: all packaging must meet the following requirements. It must serve the physical properties of all dosage forms and protect them against damage or breakage. It must not alter the identity of the product. It must preserve the characteristic properties of the product so that the latter complies with its specifications. So remember, if your product is sensitive to moisture, you want your package to protect your product from moisture. If it is sensitive to oxygen, you want your package to protect your product from oxygen so that for the full shelf life, the product is protected. Okay. And lastly, it must protect the product against undesirable or adulterating chemical, biological, or physical entities. Okay. So we stopped there before we took a break for Christmas. Next, I want us to look at container product compatibility. Usually, this is something that will be carried out during drug development. When you discover a new drug and you develop it until you want to release it to the market, one of the tests that you have to carry out is the test on compatibility. You choose a container to be able to store your product. But before you choose product and the container, to ensure that during the whole shelf life, you will not have any interaction between the product and the container. Because if there is interaction, what happens is you end up with you end up with substances that could actually harm your patient, or you may end up with a product that has deteriorated before it gets to the patient. Okay, so it is important to know the possible interaction between the primary container and the product. Normally, during the primary research and development stage, product component stability and compatibility with container systems are confirmed. The question of whether a packaging will provide the required protection for the pharmaceutical product and the required stability over a certain time period can only be answered by means of real-time stability studies. So usually, as much as based on the physical characteristics and chemical characteristics of your product, it's possible to predict compatibility. Usually, it's a requirement that you carry out real-time stability studies. You choose, after you have chosen your ideal package, during storage, you actually check to ensure that the product is actually compatible with the package, okay? You check it for the full shelf life to ensure that there is no interaction between your product and your package. Such studies must evaluate the changes in the quality of the product in contact with its packaging during a period equivalent to its intended shelf life. So this is the expectation, that if you have said that your, say, syrup is going to last for 3 years on the market, okay? Expectation is that you're going to test compatibility between the syrup and the package for the full 3 years, okay? To be able to ascertain that as much as I have said my product is going to last for 2 years, okay, I can confirm that in contact with the package that I have chosen, okay, this is actually true, that for the 3 years, there is no interaction between the package and the product. The interactions between the container and the product can fall under the following categories. We can have release of chemicals from components of the packaging material. So remember, here we are looking at, let's take, for example, a liquid in a bottle, okay? When you have the liquid coming into contact with the bottle, interaction can mean that there is a reaction between the bottle and the liquid. And because of that, the packaging material, the bottle, is releasing substances into the product, okay? So you can actually appreciate that if there is that interaction releasing material into the product, you can actually end up causing harm to your patient. Because remember, the patient was not supposed to consume the bottle. The patient is consuming only the drug. But if the bottle is releasing substances into the product, then it means that the patient will end up consuming those substances. Then secondly, there is release of visible or subvisible particles. So the first case, you actually have soluble substances that are released into the product. In the second case, you're actually releasing visible particles or subvisible particles into the product, okay? Then there's absorption or adsorption of pharmaceutical components by the packaging material. Remember, by the time you're releasing your product onto the market, this is a well-formulated product. Probably you have added, if it is a liquid, you have added maybe something like a preservative, okay? Or if it is something like an emulsion, you have added stabilizing agents. If it is a suspension, you have added agents that are going to actually act as suspending agents, okay? Now, if you get a scenario whereby adsorption is happening, what is going to happen is these components that were used to actually make your product stable may actually come out of solution and adsorb onto the side of the bottle, okay? When you adsorb, say, preservative out of the product, what is going to happen is you may end up having microorganisms growing in your product, not because you did not add preservative, but because you added preservative, but the preservative adsorbed onto the bottle, okay? And therefore, it is not available to prevent growth of microorganisms. One thing you need to note is that everything you add to the product must remain in solution, okay? If the preservative comes out of solution and adsorbs or precipitate, it will not be able to prevent growth of microorganisms. Only the free preservative that is still in solution is able to prevent growth of microorganisms. Okay? Then you can also have chemical reactions between the pharmaceutical product and the packaging. What happens is you get a product. Okay? That product that you're getting was not intended to be consumed by the patient. But because of this reaction, you may end up having a patient consuming substances that are harmful. Then degradation of the packaging components in contact with the pharmaceutical product. Again, remember when we were looking at functions of packaging, we said that the package is supposed to contain the product, to handle the product, okay, so that it can be transferred from the manufacturer to the patient. But you can imagine if the package is being undergoing degradation, what is going to happen is that the package will actually degrade, it will spoil, and it will not be able to contain the product. Then the influence of the manufacturing process. Again, it's important that if you are producing, say, an injectable product, and the injectable product is going to undergo sterilization before it is released for use, you need to be sure that the packaging material you're using can withstand sterilization. For instance, probably you want to take your product through heat sterilization. The packaging you choose, you have to ensure that that package can actually withstand the heat sterilization. It should not degrade due to the sterilization process, okay? You also have, when you're choosing packaging, you also have to consider storage condition, okay? Pharmaceutical products should be stored in accordance with GMP for storage areas. The nature of the active pharmaceutical ingredient or product in totality will determine the kind of packaging that is required. For example, packaging requirements of medicinal products kept at temperatures between 2 to 8 degrees. These are refrigeration temperatures. Remember, we talked about refrigeration, which is different from freezer conditions, okay? When we talk about may differ from those of products intended for tropical countries or light sensitive products. So depending on the storage conditions of your product, you need to ensure that your packaging material can withstand those storage conditions. If you're going to store your product in a freezer, you must ensure that that packaging can withstand those low temperatures. If the contents are sterile, sterility must be maintained, including that of any unused remaining product. For instance, eye drops. When you're actually packaging eye drops, you need to ensure that because eye drops need to be sterile, you need to ensure that your package is able to maintain sterility, okay? And remember, we talked about this. We said that the packaging for the eye drop has been made in such a way that it can generate the eye drop, but again, it can ensure sterility for the period that the patient is using the drug. Okay. The shelf life and utilization period are always determined in relation to storage conditions and stability of the active pharmaceutical ingredient. Normal storage conditions are defined as storage in dry, well-ventilated premises at temperatures of between 15 to 25 degrees, or depending on climatic conditions, up to 30 degrees Celsius. When you get into practice, you will realize that usually there are drugs that when manufacturing companies are manufacturing drugs, they will label drugs that are meant to be, say, sold in Africa, tropical areas, and they will produce other drugs that are meant, say, to be used in Europe, okay? And the storage conditions will differ, okay? When you look at these two places, the conditions are different, okay? Temperature conditions are different, okay? So that when you're actually preparing a product to be taken to Dubai, and you're preparing a product to be stored, to be used in the tropics, and you're preparing a product to be used in temperate regions, the shelf life may actually differ, okay, because of the different storage conditions. Okay, that's what we are referring to here. Extraneous odors, other indications of contamination, and intense light have to be excluded. Okay. Now, there are different raw materials that can be used for packaging. Okay. And we'll be looking at this next semester when we'll be looking at drug development. But for now, we will just mention that there are materials such as cardboard that will be used to make boxes and display units, okay? Paper to make labels and leaflets, glass for ampoules, bottles, vials, syringes, cartridges, plastic can also be used to make bottles, okay? Bags, tubes, these are bags that usually you will find bags being used for packaging blood products, okay? So we have plastics that have laminates with paper or foil. Then we have metal like aluminium that are used to package for producing collapsible tubes, rigid cans, foils. They're used to produce pressurized containers like those that are used for inhalers. Then we have rubber that is used for closures and plungers in syringes. That rubber part in the syringe that is used to push the drug, that is what we are referring to as the plunger. Keep in mind that there are some drugs that come from the manufacturer packaged in a syringe, okay, that is ready for injection. For such a drug, that syringe is considered a package, okay, such that the requirements we've talked about apply. You have to ensure there's compatibility between that syringe and the product that you're going to package in it. Okay, so when we talk about glass, glass is one of the common packaging material you will find being used for pharmaceutical storage. Okay, when you think about glass, you always have to think about hydrolytic stability. Glass is of different types. We have type 1, type 2, and type 3 glass. And type 1 glass is highly hydrolytic resistant, okay, due to the chemical composition of the glass. And this type 1 glass is usually used for packaging injectable products, especially those that have to undergo terminal sterilization. Terminal sterilization is whereby you take your product, package it in a glass bottle, seal it, and then now take it through the sterilization process. It means that the sterilization process will happen while the product is packaged in the glass, meaning the glass will go through the sterilization process plus the product. So you need a glass that will be able to withstand the high temperatures. And at those high temperatures, it will not release substances into the product. Usually it can be used for packaging pharmaceutical products, injectable, have to go through terminal sterilization. Type 3 glass, on the other hand, is soda lime silica glass with only moderate hydrolytic resistance. Generally, type 3 glass will be used for packaging oral products, okay? You will not find type 3 glass being used for packaging liquid injectable products. Once in a while, you will find it being used for packaging solid injectable products. These are products that have to be reconstituted before they are injected. They will be used, the type 3 will be used because you do not reconstitute it unless you're ready to use it. So immediately you reconstitute, you don't store the product in the glass, you reconstitute it and use it immediately, because this type 3 glass has a high hydrolytic. It is actually hydrolytic, okay? It has moderate hydrolytic resistance, okay? So it's important when you're looking at packaging to consider this, okay? And you do not want to package alkaline products in type 3 glass, because the alkaline product will actually increase the hydrolytic properties of the type 3 glass. Okay, so the manufacturer of pharmaceutical product is responsible for ensuring the suitability of the chosen container. As we've said, type 1 glass is suitable for parenteral use. Type 2 glass is suitable for acidic and neutral aqueous preparations. Type 3 glass containers are in general suitable for non-aqueous preparations for parenteral use, or for powders for parenteral use, except for freeze-dried preparations. Because remember, for freeze-dried preparations, usually when the preparation is put in the glass, it's in liquid form. It contains water, okay? And you don't want to expose type 3 glass to water, okay? Because of that hydrolytic property, okay? So usually type 3 glass can be used for oral preparations. It can be used for non-aqueous preparations and for powders for reconstitution. Okay, so I hope that is clear. The glass material chosen should not release substances in quantities sufficient to affect stability of the preparation, to prevent the risk of toxicity. It may be necessary to have detailed information on the glass composition so that the potential hazards can be assessed. Preparations for parenteral use are normally presented in colorless glass, but colored glass may be used for substances known to be light sensitive. Colorless or colored glass is used for other pharmaceutical preparations. And for powders for parenteral use, permit visual inspection of the contents. The inner surface of glass containers may be specially treated to improve hydrolytic resistance, and this we have seen with type 2 glass. Type 2 glass is usually, it's basically type 3 glass that has been surface treated. Okay, we'll go more into this when we will be looking at drug development, okay? Because in that unit, we will look extensively at how to choose packaging, okay? So except for type 1 glass containers for pharmaceutical preparations are not to be reused, okay? Containers for human blood and blood components must not be reused. Glass containers for pharmaceutical use should comply with the relevant test or test for hydrolytic resistance. When glass containers have non-glass components, the tests apply only to the glass part of the container. So that is it for pharmaceutical packaging. I want us to look at special packaging. There are 3 types of special packaging that we'll be looking at. We have the tamper-resistant packaging, we have the child resistant packaging, and then we have the compliance packaging. Okay, now with this tamper-resistant packaging, we already alluded to this last year when we were introducing packaging. This is whereby you have a packaging material that is able to give you evidence when tampering has occurred. So for instance, we talked about the drinking water, okay? Boaz, remember what we said about drinking water. How, when you buy a bottle of packaged drinking water, how do you tell that this bottle of water has not been tampered with and it is good for consumption?
You check for the seal.
Yes. Usually you will check for the seal. When the manufacturer releases that package to you, usually there is a seal, okay? And so long as the seal is intact, you're assured that the water you have bought is actually safe for drinking. If you find that the seal has been broken, then usually that tells you that the water is no longer safe for drinking, okay? That's what we are talking about here. It's the same concept, Okay, so regulations specify that it should tamper-resistant packaging should have the following. Number one, it should have an indicator or barrier to entry, which, if breached or missing, provides visible evidence that tampering has occurred. Okay, the tamper-proofing can involve a secondary package or container system, or it involves the immediate container system or a combination of both. Okay, then the tamper resistance feature should remain intact when handled in a reasonable manner during manufacture, distribution, and retail display. You don't want a scenario whereby, for instance, with the water bottle, that during transportation, the tamper itself can just come off, so that it hasn't necessarily, it breaks anytime. Okay, that's what we are saying, that the resistance been handled reasonably. Okay. It also specifies that there should be a prominent statement placed on the package to alert consumers on the specific tamper-proof resistant feature. Okay, the statement should be displayed such that it will be unaffected if the tamper-resistant feature is breached or missing. So when you get that bottle of water, on the bottle it is indicated, "Do not accept if seal is broken." Okay, that statement should remain breaks the seal, you're not able to tell. Okay, what we are saying is, for these medicines, there should be a statement below that seal saying that if the seal is missing, do not accept. Okay, so that the patient can see it. Even when the seal is not there, the patient can see that the seal is not there, therefore this product has been tampered with. Okay, so these are, in summary, these are the key features of the tamper resistance packaging. Okay, number one, the label statement. As we have said, if the seal is missing, do not accept. Okay, or if the seal is broken, do not accept. Then we have the indicator barrier. Okay, whereby this there's a feature. Okay, that is barring access to the product. Okay, there's a closure that is barring access to the product. Okay, then there is a distinctive by design feature for the indicator barrier, such that it should be clear whether it has been tampered with or not. When someone looks at that water bottle, they should be able to see that there was actually a seal on this bottle. Even though it is missing, I can see there was a seal, and because I can see the seal has been broken, I will not accept this bottle from the seller. Okay, so that's it for the tamper resistant packaging. Next, we will look at the child resistant packaging, and this is a poison prevention packaging. Okay, the purpose of the child resistant packaging is to ensure that if a child comes into contact with that medicine, they are not in a position to open that bottle, because if they open it, they'll be able to access the medicines, and the medicines may actually be consumed and cause harm to the child. They will result in poisoning. So for that reason, this child resistant packaging is a poison prevention package. It is supposed to ensure that packaging is designed such that it is difficult for children to open within reasonable time, and that is, it's not difficult for adults to use properly. Establishing child resistance effectiveness can be tested through two protocols according to the Poison Prevention Packaging Act. And here, for a bottle package, a specific percentage of test children should not be able to open the package, even after being instructed on how to do it. Okay, so for you to, when you develop a child resistant packaging, you have to prove that children are not able to open it, but you also have to prove that senior adults are able to open it. Remember, in one of the classes last year, I showed you a picture of some senior adults who have conditions like arthritis, whereby the senior adult may not be able to open a bottle, okay, if it is complicated. So this is what we are talking about here. When you're coming up with a child-resistant packaging, there are two protocols that are followed, okay, for it to be approved as a child-resistant packaging. The first part of the protocol is you should be able to prove that children are not able to open the package. And the second part of the protocol, you should be able to prove that senior adults can actually open the package. Okay, so this is the first part, which is the child test protocol. You for this protocol, you will pick a panel of 200 children, okay, and this panel is picked to consist of 50% male, 50% female, aged between 42 to 51 months. They are tested in pairs, okay? You pair the children up and then you give them the package to open without being given any instructions. So you pick the right children, the correct number, of the correct age, put them in pairs, then give them the package, okay? And they are told, the children are expected to open the package without being given any instructions, okay? After that, you count the number of children who are able to open the package, okay? And calculate the percentage, okay? Then the children are instructed on how to open the package and a demonstration is done. So remember the first part, you give them the package and tell them to open without giving them any instructions, okay? Then you calculate the percentage of children who are able to open it. Secondly, you give the children the package and now demonstrate to the children how to open it, okay? Then they are given 5 minutes to try and open the package again, okay? The number of children that is able to open the package is then counted and the percentage is calculated, okay? This is the criteria. For the package to pass the test as a child-resistant package, in the first 5 minutes before the children are instructed on how to open it, 85% should not be able to open the package. In the next 5 minutes after the instructions, 80% of the children should not be able to open the package. If your package passes this criteria, then it can be approved as it's been approved. Because remember, we have only fulfilled the first part of the requirements. We have proven that children cannot be able to open it. But the next part needs also to be checked, that senior adults can actually open the package, okay? So this is the senior adult protocol. You now take the package and give it to senior adults to see whether they'll be able to open it, okay? So when designing a child-resistant packaging, it is important to prove that children are unable to open the package. The child-resistant feature should not, however, hinder senior adults from accessing the contents of the medication. Because remember, some of these senior adults may live alone. They may not be able to access the medicines, okay? If the package will hinder them, okay? Therefore, the second protocol is used to access, or rather assess this feature. 100 senior adults are chosen between the ages of 50 to 70 years. They are given 5 minutes to try and open the package without receiving any instructions. Then the opening process is explained and demonstrated. Okay, so you pick 100 senior citizens between the ages of 50 and 70 years. You give them 5 minutes. Don't give them any instructions. Just give them 5 minutes to try and open. Okay, then you demonstrate. After that, you demonstrate, okay, how the package is to be opened. Okay, then after that, they are given 1 minute to open. Okay, for the package to pass, 90% of the senior adults must be able to open and close the package properly after the instructions have been given, okay? Remember, why are we talking about 1 minute? Some of the conditions that the senior adults may be having, think about something like angina. Think about something like a heart condition. This is a senior adult who may only have a short time to be able to access their medicine and take them. So you don't want a scenario whereby a senior adult has to struggle with opening a container for 5 minutes. Okay. So for this container to pass and be approved, okay, one, you have to prove children are not able to open it. Secondly, you have to prove senior adults can open the package within 1 minute after being instructed on how to open it. Okay, so that's it for this child resistant packaging. Next, we have the compliance packaging. This is a pre-packaged unit that provides a one treatment cycle of the medication to both the pharmacist and the patient in a ready-to-use package. Okay, it's usually based on blister packaging using a unit of use dosing. The separate dosage units are separate, and separate days are indicated on the package to help remind the patient when and how to take. Okay, so this is what we are talking about. You can see this is these are birth control pills. Okay, on top we have the days of the week that have been written. Okay, and usually the patient will be told, for instance, if this is Monday, if the patient is starting on Monday, they'll be told to start on Monday. Okay, the pill that is labeled Monday, they will take it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, okay, Sunday, and then again on Monday, they will continue like that. The beauty of this is that if a patient comes here, it's Tuesday, and yet they can see that the Monday pill is there, it shows them that they actually failed to take their Monday pill. Okay, and this you can see, this is labeled with days of the month. Again, it's the same concept. The patient can tell that if today is 14th, and yet I can see at the day 13 they still appeal, I'm able to see that I actually missed appeal. Excuse me. Okay, so that's why we are saying it's a pre-packaged unit. It provides one treatment cycle. So for instance, if it is the birth control pill, these are usually sold in cycles. Okay, so it contains one treatment cycle of the medication and to both the pharmacist and patient, such that the pharmacist is able to explain to the patient how to take this medication. Okay, it's based on blister packaging. As you can see, these tablets are actually in blisters. Okay, remember we talked about the blister packaging. You can see they are actually packaged in blister. Okay, and it's indicated with the day of the week, okay, that the patient is supposed to take the drug. Usually these are used for things like chronic illnesses where the patient is taking the drug continuously. Okay, so you want to ensure that the patient does not forget. And if they forget, they can actually tell that I missed a pill. Remember, we talked about this when we were looking at dispensing, and we talked about what to tell the patient if they come and tell you that they missed a pill. Okay, so the primary purpose of compliance package is to serve as a patient education tool for health professionals. Here, as a pharmacist, you're able to help your patient because there, the package is indicated with the days of the week. You're able to guide the patient on how to take. If it is the contraceptive, you're able to tell them when to start, and you're able to guide them so that if they forget, they can actually, excuse me, they can actually tell. Okay, because remember, if all the medicines are in a bottle, the patient may not be able to tell whether they actually took their medicine or not. Sometimes patients can swallow a drug and then they forget whether they took it or not. But if it is in a compliance packaging, the patient will be able to see, oh, I actually took my medicine for today. Okay, they will not double the dose. They will be able to see if they missed a dose. Okay, so it makes it easier for patients to remember to take their medications correctly at home. For example, oral contraceptives that we have mentioned. So these are oral contraceptives. Okay, again, this is compliance packaging. You can see they are labeled with the days of the week, and all the medicines that the patient is going to take has been indicated. We have the days of the week, we have the time. Okay, like here we have morning, noon, evening, bedtime. Okay, so usually you can have these that have been packaged in the industry. Okay, but you can also have this having patient compliance tools, whereby you have a tool like this. If you have an elderly patient, you basically take their medicines and place them in this tool. Okay, you can see like this looks like a tool. Okay, such that the medicines that have been placed here are different. Okay, the ones for the morning are different, the ones for noon are different from the ones evening, and the ones at bedtime. You can have such tools that are actually used to make it easier for patients to take their medication. Okay, so again, this is an example of a compliance package. Again, usually you'll find this for contraceptive pills. Okay. Any questions up to that point?
Yeah, thanks, Doc, for. I wanted to know
Yes.
when when we are submitting for registration of products at the registrar.
Yes.
Do companies provide proof for criteria, especially now the criteria we have used to show on child and stuff? Do they present? Do also in terms of the CDD form? Do they have that information?
What information are you talking about?
Remember, you have shown us the criteria
Mm-hmm.
on kids, how you can prove
Yes.
that there's a criteria that is followed,
Mm-hmm.
because the regulator should be also sure that this drugs cannot be mishandled, cannot be taken by kids anyhowly.
Mm-hmm.
So does the regulator, is he bothered, or this is just at the manufacturing level?
Generally, this is at the manufacturing level. Remember, with this packaging, it's not the manufacturer of, it's not necessarily the manufacturer of the drug who is developing this package. The package may actually be developed separately. Okay, when you go to the industry, you can actually when you'll be at the end of this year, I believe you'll be going for attachment, and it would be interesting. You can ask the at the industry where they get their packaging. Okay, and you'll be able to see that there are companies that specifically specialize in packaging material. Okay, there are those that specifically specialize in printing material for pharmaceutical use. Some of them will print, say, for food like biscuits and cereal. They basically specialize in that. And there are those that will specialize in producing primary packaging like bottles, plastic bottles, glass bottles. Okay, those are the industries that will have to prove that this package can actually be used, and they will have to prove that protocol. Okay, so generally when the industry, the pharmaceutical industry, are picking the package, they don't necessarily have to do the test themselves, but they will have to pick a package that has been demonstrated that it can actually be child resistant packaging. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes, it informs me. And then on the issue of reuse of pharmaceutical containers,
Yes.
I've seen the containers of maybe a container has there are 1,000 tablets, and when these containers, if there are people who come and they want to collect them for, or even small ones, 100 ml, 500 ml, to go and use at home for salt shakers or storage. And also we have the bulk ones. Remember, there's one who, so you find they buy a syrup maybe in a 20-liter container or a 20-liter or 50-liter stuff. And when they are done with these containers are sold in the market for use for water and other stuff. Is that within the right way, or that one is not good?
Okay. In that case, my comment would be, you know, with the when you talk about reuse, our concern is compatibility. Okay, because remember, when we are talking about a drug, we want to look at stability. And when you talk about stability, you want to ensure that the drug that you're putting in the bottle is actually compatible with the bottle. Okay. And when a bottle has been stored for a while, it may actually, especially when you're thinking about something like the type 3. Remember, we said type 1, it's possible to actually use it, but type 3, it has moderate hydrolytic resistance. And what happens is when it comes into contact with water, it may actually react. That's why we said it is usually used for either non-aqueous drugs or powder that immediately it is reconstituted, it is used. The challenge usually is if you're going to place a drug inside the bottle, and yet it's not a bottle whose stability you're assured of, that would be a challenge. Okay, so our concern here is the drug that we are placing inside the bottle that has capacity to react. Okay, now when it comes to using the bottles for other uses other than pharmaceuticals, the concern may not be so much, because remember, with the pharmaceuticals, we are looking at stability of our product. We are looking at maybe we may have, adsorption of your bottle, or we may have leaching of the bottle and releasing substances into the drug and things like that. Okay. So, and usually when that happens, it will interfere with stability of your drug. Okay. So that is usually the concern. Okay. Now, when people are picking this packaging material for use in the home, the challenge may be there, or it may not be significant if the material that is going to be placed in the bottle, okay, is not going to degrade the bottle. Okay, because remember, now the challenge is with this using the material at home, we are not sure what is going to be put in there. Okay, if you're going to put in something that is alkaline, it is definitely going to degrade the bottle, and the bottle may end up releasing substances that will be consumed by the person using them. But if they are going to use it for solids, okay, the solids may not necessarily interact with the glass bottle. So again, that is basically just food for thought, okay? But our main concern is for drugs, because remember, with drugs, before you release them from the industry, you have tested and proven that there's compatibility between your drug and your bottle. Okay, so you don't want to just use bottles anyhowly, because you may actually end up with a deteriorated product. You don't want a scenario whereby you're actually taking an injectable, transferring it into another bottle. Okay, a surety of safety and efficacy is not assured. Okay, so I don't know whether that answers your question.
I'm satisfied. I understand. I get the
Okay.
concept.
Okay. Thank you. Any other question? Okay. So if there are no other questions, I want us to shortly look at pharmacy records. I'm going to send you a document uh, containing some of the pharmacy records or records that are kept in the pharmacy. And I want you to look at those documents so that you familiarize yourselves with the records that are to be kept in the pharmacy. Okay. There are records there are governance records, there are records for controlled drugs, there are records for uh, basically clinical audits. These are basically records to ensure that you're running your pharmacy according to the law. Okay. There are records that are required by law to be kept. Remember, we alluded to this when we were looking at classification of medicines. We said that for your uh, prescription, you have to actually store a copy in the pharmacy. And we said for your controlled drug, you have to actually keep the original prescription. You will not send the patient away with. Sometimes patients will come to the pharmacy and tell you, I want my prescription back. When PPB comes, they will want to see the original prescription for the controlled drug. Okay, remember we talked about this in class. So there are some drugs that you may actually take a copy and keep a copy for yourself and send the patient away with the original prescription. But for controlled drug, if you dispense the drug, you keep the original prescription. It is a requirement by law. Okay, so we'll just look at some of the records, but I'll send you a document where you'll be able to look at an extensive description of each of these records. Okay, so this is an example of a record that is kept in the pharmacy. This is what we refer to as a bin card or a stock card. It's basically important for ensuring stock control. It helps you to be able to understand how much drugs are in the pharmacy. Okay, so with the bin card, it has item description. So basically, like here, you can indicate the name of the from KEMSA, assuming we are a government hospital, we indicate here, received from KEMSA, okay? We indicate the number that we have received. Maybe we have received 50, okay? Then we indicate the number of balance. Maybe in stock, we already had 20 remaining. So when we receive the 50, now we have 70, okay? Then if there is anything you need to indicate concerning the new stock you have received, you indicate there and sign, okay? Then the pediatric ward, okay? They want to order 2 packets at number issued, then we sign. That is a stock card, okay? Usually you will find this being used in government facilities, but some of these facilities have actually automated them, okay? So you may find physical bin cards, or you may find automated system. Will send you a document with these records. Note the type of record, note why it is kept, and the length of time it should be stored. Okay. If you're looking at the bin card, okay, the stock card that we've just looked at, okay, it is a bin card. It is kept so that you're able to control stocks within your pharmacy, okay, and it should be stored. Okay, usually there are specifications. Each hospital may have a specification on how long they should be stored for audit purposes. Okay, if you're actually auditing the system to see whether you're having a lot of expiries, or you want to calculate whether you need to increase the reorder level or increase the reserve, okay? It's important that you actually keep that stock card for a certain period of time, okay? So records such as audits that are being done in the pharmacy, okay? You want to look at patient complaints, okay? If complaints or being records, we want to look at our staff competent, okay? Include this in governance records, okay? Then we have clinical interventions. Did you carry out any interventions in the pharmacy? Were they? We have requisition orders, we have order books, we have delivery notes, okay? We have extemporaneous preparations, okay? We also have prescriptions, okay? Then we have equipment and premises. You can also have records for equipment and premises. Remember, if you have, say, an extemporaneous preparation unit, you need to be able to show us that your equipment is validated, okay? Because remember, if you have quantities, remember, balances can drift, okay? So that today you think you're weighing 10 grams, when in real grams, okay? And that can actually be very dangerous if the drug you're weighing is sensitive, or if it has a narrow therapeutic window. Okay, so it's important for you to maintain validation equipment and maintenance logs for your equipment. Okay, you also have cleaning logs sure that, and in the evening. Okay, because you can imagine if your fridge fails, then it means destroy. They may actually deteriorate simply because you did not notice in good time. If you have a temperature log, you will start to notice that the temperature is actually not maintained. So you will put in measures to prevent spoilage of your product. Then we have patient safety. Yes, okay. Dispensing incidents. Okay, in case of incidents that resulted in disability or death, this need to be recorded. Okay. Then we also have recalls and drug alerts. If you get any recalls from the industry, they tell you that we have done all the drugs that were supplied to you. You need to have records of that. Okay. Responsible pharmacist record. Usually, PPB requires you to display the certificate of the superintendent pharmacist. Okay. Then stock handling and stock transfer. These include things like invoices, delivery notes, order books, stock cards. Okay. It's important for you to have this, but especially for controlled drugs, because these are it's a legal requirement for you to actually maintain this for controlled drugs. Okay. Of patient-owned drugs, there are pharmacies that usually will tell their patients if they have drugs that needs to be destroyed, they can bring them back to the pharmacy. Okay. So this usually you should have records for waste medicines. Okay. Remember, controlled drugs, destruction of controlled drugs should not be lumped together with the rest of the medicines. Okay. So the rest of them, the controlled drugs should have a separate destruction record. Okay. And you need to have destruction records for both hazardous and non-hazardous waste. Okay. So it's important that records are actually kept. We also need a record for prescriptions. Then we have clinical trial records. If your hospital is engaged in clinical trials and the pharmacy is involved in that, the patients are coming to pick their medicines from the pharmacy, you need to have clinical trial records. Okay. You need, if you're producing products in the pharmacy, you need to have those batch production records. For instance, if you're carrying out extemporaneous preparations in the pharmacy, ensure that the records are there. Okay. You need to have protocols. Okay. They should be kept in the pharmacy. There should be a record. You should have dispensing records. You should have destruction records. For clinical trials, all these records must specifically be kept for the drug under trial. Okay. And should the regulatory body visit, okay, for audits, you should be able to produce all these records. Okay. As I mentioned, I'm going to send you that document. Ensure that you're able to tell the type of record, you're able to tell why it is kept. Okay. And for some of these records, it's important for you to understand, especially the legal records. You should be able to okay. If there are no questions, we will move to drug formularies. Okay. Now, formularies hopefully you guys have come across things like the drug index. You have come across the BNF, the British National Formulary. These are examples of drug formularies. Okay. Now, these formularies are basically they are compilations. Okay, they will contain information on medicinal preparations. Okay, so for instance, if you look at the 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 BNF, okay, if you look at the BNF, it usually will contain information on the drug. Okay, so for instance, you will have information on, say, paracetamol. Okay, now that information, it will give you basically a summary of what is contained generally in your pharmacology textbook. Okay, and these formularies are basically tools that you use in the pharmacy during dispensing. They are supposed to help you. If you need to make a quick reference, you can run to the BNF, you can run to the drug index. The BNF is a British national formulary. The drug index is basically an index that is used in East Africa. Okay, it will tell you the drugs that are available in East Africa. It will give you a summary on that drug. What is it? What is the active ingredient? What are the indications? Okay. What is it used to treat? What is the dosage? Okay. If you're giving it to a child, what is the dose that you're supposed to give? If you're giving it to an adult, what is the dose that you're supposed to give? Should this patient be having an issue with the kidney, how are you supposed to adjust the dose? If the patient is having an issue with the liver, how do you adjust the dose? If this patient is a breastfeeding mother, in the BNF, it will be indicated whether this drug is safe for breastfeeding mothers or it should be avoided. If this mother is pregnant, in that BNF or the drug formulary, it will be indicated whether that drug is safe for a pregnant woman or not. Okay, it will also indicate whether this drug can be safe for children or not. It will indicate whether this drug should be avoided in kidney failure or not. It will indicate whether this drug should be avoided in liver failure or not. Okay, so generally, it is like a small pharmacology textbook, but summarized. Okay, so it's usually a good tool for the pharmacist to have with them in the pharmacy, so that if you need to make a quick reference, you can actually use it. Okay, so originally formularies were compilations of medicinal preparations with the formulae of medicinal compounds. A formulary is a list of drugs approved to be prescribed at a particular hospital in a particular health system or under a particular health insurance. Okay, so it's a list of drugs recommended for use by a group of practitioners. Okay, it is compiled by members and regularly revised. Drugs are selected for inclusion on the basis of efficacy, safety, cost effectiveness, and patient acceptability. The drugs listed on the formulary should be readily available, and contraindications. The available formulations and cost may also be included. And usually an introduction on how the drugs were selected and by whom and how to use the formulary is usually provided. Okay, so when you talk about formularies, okay, remember we've said it's a compilation pocket handbook for pharmacology. Okay, so drugs are included. Okay, and the drugs that are included are basically drugs that are available within the facility. So you can have a formulary that is used nationwide. If it is a formulary for KNH, it means that the drugs in that formulary are actually available at KNH, okay? The Kenyatta National Hospital. If you have a formulary for the hospital in JKUAT, it means that the drugs in that formulary are available at JKUAT Hospital, okay? Do not put drugs in the formulary that you're not going to stock, okay? So I hope that is clear. Examples of formularies, as we've mentioned, we have the BNF, we have the drug index. BNF is the British National Formulary. Drug index, as we've said, is used in East Africa. Then we have the Kenya National Essential Drug List. This is a formulary that is you may actually have individual hospital formularies, like I'm aware Kiambu County Hospital released their own formulary, okay? Uh, either a few years or a few months back, okay, they were launching their hospital formulary, okay? Then we may have specialist formularies like palliative care formulary, pediatric formulary. Like if you look at the Gertrude's Children's Hospital, they have their own formulary, okay? Then we also have the WHO Essential Drug List for use by developing countries. Now, developing countries usually do not have a lot of resources to be able to put into developing a formulary. So because of that, usually what will happen is that they will actually rely on WHO. So if you look at the Kenya National Essential Drug List, it borrows heavily from the WHO Essential Drug List for use by developing countries. Now, what you need to note about the WHO Essential Drug List, it covers the whole world, okay? Now, as you well know by now, there are some diseases that may not necessarily be in Kenya, for example. They may be in another area of the world. Now, when you're going in to make your own essential drug list using the WHO, you will pick what is relevant to you, okay? If you're in the tropics, you will pick what is relevant to you. If you're in Europe, for example, you will pick what is relevant to you, okay? But generally, here, WHO has done the work for you, okay? So you can use the whole formulary, but it makes more sense to actually narrow it down to what is relevant to you, so that even when you put the formulary in use in your hospitals, we are sure that the drugs that you have named in the formulary are actually available within the hospital. Okay, so what are the benefits of formularies? Okay, we have rational prescribing. When we talk about rational prescribing, okay, this is what we mean. You're able to pick the right drug for the right patient at the correct dose, okay, in the correct regimen. Okay, so it's important that you appreciate what rational prescribing is, because remember, when you're developing a formulary, you're actually looking at all the cost, the benefit analysis, okay? You're looking at the drug, you're looking at the side effects, you're looking at the costs of it, okay? Such that now when you decide that I'm going to pick for treatment of arthritis, I am settling on Brufen instead of diclofenac, okay? You have thought through, okay? You have looked at the safety of Brufen, you have looked at the safety of diclofenac, and you have decided, okay, because diclofenac a few months back, it was put under, watch because of issues of heart problems. I do not want to put all of my patients on diclofenac, okay? For that reason, I will choose Brufen instead for my patients, okay? So That is the rationale. There's rationale behind the drug that you have chosen. Okay. Then we have cost-effective prescribing. You are going to pick a drug that majority of your patients can afford. Remember, we alluded to this when in class when we were talking about cost. We said, for instance, if you look at the high-end hospitals, they will not opt for generics because the price margin, the margin for the generics is very low. Okay, but the profit margin for the originals is higher. So you will find that for high-end hospitals, they will opt for original brands, or even for hospitals that take insurance. Okay, but if you're in a government facility, for example, majority of the patients who are coming there may not be able to afford the originator brands. So you should be able to treat your patient adequately at a cost that they can afford. Like we talked about an example in class, we talked about compare something like augmenting. Okay, a dose of augmenting may actually cost up to even 2,000, 3,000 Kenya shillings. Your patient may not be able to afford, but they need to be treated. So what do? You look at a generic that probably will come to 500 shillings. Your patient will be able to afford that. Okay, or you look at a different molecule that the patient can actually be able to afford. So you may actually decide, I will give them erythromycin, for example. Okay, and that erythromycin is cheaper. It may be maybe 300 shillings, and the patient can afford it, and their condition is treated just as if they had used the original or more expensive molecule. Then we have education value. Okay, formularies are educational because as you're looking at, if you look at a formulary, usually you are able to get the information on why the drug was chosen. Okay, you can see the side effect profiles, you can see the contraindications, you can see all that information that we mentioned. Maybe this drug should not be used in patients with liver failure. It cannot be used in patients with kidney failures. It should not be given to breastfeeding mothers. That is the educational value we are talking about. Okay, and then another benefit, it allows continuity of care. For example, look at it this way. When you look at the formulary for HIV management, okay, the same guidelines that have been given by Ministry of Health for management of HIV in Kenya will be used at KNH. They will be used at the county hospital, okay, in Thika. They will be used at Kiambu sub-county. They will be used up to the level 4, level 3 hospital up to level 1 hospital. Okay. Now, when we talk about continuity of care, the guidelines that have been given by Ministry of Health are very specific. They will tell you for first line, this is the drug. Okay. Tenofovir is using that and you want to change it. They will move you to second line. They will tell you if the patient is using efavirenz, you move them to this second line. If the patient is using nevirapine, you move them to this second line. There is no confusion. It is very clear. Okay, such that if your patient is seen at Kiambu, okay, hospital, and they are referred to Thika, okay, there is no doubt on what the doctor is meant to do. They can see clearly from the record you followed the guideline, and there is no confusion whereby a patient went to some hospital and they were started on second line. instead of being started on first line. Okay, this is actually very good in HIV treatment, because some of the private hospitals initially were not following guidelines, and you would find a patient who went to a private hospital instead of going to a government hospital. They would be started on a second line regimen. When that regimen fails, the doctors have no idea what to do, okay, because they did not follow the guidelines. Okay, so continuity of care is actually broken. No one knows what to do. With the government hospitals, because they are following the guidelines, usually they will tell you for first line, this is the option. You have option 1, option 2. If a patient is on option 1 and they fail treatment, the guidelines clearly tell you what to do. If a patient is option 2 and they fail treatment, the guidelines clearly tell you what to do. If they fail on the second line treatment, the guidelines clearly give you a salvage regimen on what to do. That is the benefit of formularies. They are very clear on how treatment should be handled. Think about even treatment of hypertension. When you're managing hypertension, the guidelines will tell you, first line, you start with a diuretic, okay? If the patient is not well managed, you can move to an ACE inhibitor, okay? Then, if this patient, in case this patient has hypertension with diabetes, this is what you're supposed to do. In case this patient has hypertension with a heart problem, this is the drug you're supposed to give them. So you can see with guidelines, even if I was seen by Dr. A today, and next month I come and find that Dr. A transferred to a different hospital, and today I'm being seen by Dr. B, Dr. B is not in doubt on how to handle me. The guidelines are very clear. He can look at my prescription and know that this patient is being, all he has to do is check my blood pressure to see whether it is controlled, and care continues. I hope that is clear, okay? Then, inventory control. Remember we said when you come up with a formulary for your hospital, okay, you have decided that I am going to stock Brufen instead of aceclofenac. I'm going to stock paracetamol. I'm going to stock amoxil instead of, another molecule, okay, azithromycin or something like that, so that the people in your hospital actually know what is to be stocked. Someone who is going to buy the drugs already knows that this is what we have in our formulary. So for that reason, when we order from the supplier, this is what we are going to order. No one is left in doubt on what should be ordered, okay? And that actually assists with inventory control, okay? Then it also promotes uniformity in prescribing. We are sure that when a patient comes for treatment and they've been diagnosed, we are going to start them on first line. The guidelines are clear, okay? If this patient presents with malaria, the formulary, national formulary and guidelines have indicated that the treatment for first line treatment for malaria is AL, okay? If the patient is given AL and they come back and they are not responding, and we had tested, but remember the guidelines have said test. If the test is positive, give AL. If AL is not working, treat with quinine. So the guidelines are very clear. If this is a pregnant woman, this is what you give them, okay? So it promotes uniformity in prescribing. We don't have a scenario whereby one doctor is treating with AL, the second one is giving quinine, the third one is giving hydrochloroquine, the fourth one is using, all different, so that even when we want to get data, we want to find out which drug is working, we are not sure, okay? If you want to find out whether there is resistance, we don't know, okay? Because one time the doctor prescribed chloroquine, another time another doctor prescribed AL, Another time, a doctor prescribed quinine. We are not sure which one is actually working. So formularies will actually promote uniformity in prescribing. Okay. Then we have formulary development. I want us to look at formulary development and how it is done. Development can be done in two ways. It can either be produced from scratch, okay, or you can modify an existing one. Okay, modification is done to suit local needs. It is less time consuming than starting from scratch. So, for instance, remember at the introduction, I told you that WHO has a formulary and it covers the whole world. This formulary generally is you need resources. So WHO has the resources to do that developing countries. So you can go in as a developing country, look at what WHO has done, and you modify it. You basically pick what is relevant to you. If you're not in the tropics, you're not going to pick malaria, okay? Because if you're in the temperate regions, you will not find malaria in those areas. So you're basically picking what is relevant to you, okay? That is option one. Option two is producing it from scratch, okay? Producing it from scratch is more time consuming and it will require a lot of input, okay? So basically when we talk about producing it from scratch, we will, for instance, if we want to produce a formulary for JQuat Hospital, first of all, we will sit down and decide what kind of patients do we see at JQuat Hospital. Remember we said something like Gertrude's Children's Hospital, it has a formulary. If you're sitting on the formulary committee in Gertrude's, first of all, you will decide what kind of patients do we see in Gertrude's Hospital. We see children. What is the age range of these children? Okay, we will see them from newborns to maybe 14 years. Okay, so we will look at these children. Then we will ask ourselves, what ailments do we commonly see? Okay, we will list those ailments down. Then we will go into literature to look at how are these ailments managed. Okay, so that is how producing it from scratch, what it entails. Okay, so you can see the amount of work that will go into all this, because you can imagine if we are looking at the different diseases. Okay, so we will say if we're at JQuat Hospital, we will say, okay, what do we see? We usually see cholera cases. We usually see, gastroenteritis. We usually see hypertension. We see diabetes. Maybe we see HIV. Maybe we see TB. Maybe we see all those. We list all those down. And then we look at the kind of patients that we see. We see children, we see elderly patients, we see patients with kidney issues, we see patients with liver issues, we list all those down, okay? And then one by one, we start malaria, okay? We are managing malaria. How are we going to manage malaria, okay? First line, if a patient presents with malaria, first line, what are we going to use, okay? If first line fails, what are we going to use? Should we require admission? What injectables are we going to use? So we will list all that down. Then we come back and ask yourself, in case of a child, are we going to use the same drugs? Or do we have to look for something else? In case of a pregnant woman, are we going to use the same drug? Okay? Or we have to look at something else. Then we look at, in case of kidney failure, are we going to look at something else? Or how are we going to adjust the dose? In case of liver insufficiency, how are we going to adjust the dose? Okay, so I just want you basically to look at how producing it from scratch, the input that you need to have. Okay, so I hope that is clear. Okay, so the content in a formulary, the formulary will contain the names of those who compiled it, who is expected to use it, okay? So there are formularies that are meant to be used by experts, okay? There are drugs that will only be prescribed by experts. If you look at the BNF, for example, you will find that in the BNF, you will find what is referred to as black box instructions. I forget the right name, but you will actually see some drugs written in a black box, indicating that they are not supposed to actually be used by non-expert. Okay. It's also important to note that that drug may actually require additional monitoring. It's referred to as black box warning, okay? So that when you're actually using these drugs, okay, you are aware who is allowed to actually use this drug, okay? Who is expected to use it, okay? Then explaining its format and content. So at the introduction, they will tell you the format of the contents, okay? So for instance, you'll have the name of the drug, the class of the drug, then you have the indications, you have the side effects, you have contraindications, all those things, the format in which that information has been given, okay? Then it will state whether all drugs included are indicated for all users, and if not, how different recommendations can be distinguished. So you will find that in the BNF, it will show you there are some drugs that may not be recommended for, say, pregnant women or breastfeeding or patients with insufficiencies. Okay, so for example, the BNF will list drugs that are considered less suitable for prescribing in small font. Okay, there can also be restrictions for some drugs, for example, for those drugs to be used only by specialists. Okay, so it's important to note that. Then we have monographs. This will contain information on individual drugs. So the monograph is basically the part that contains information on all drugs. So you'll have, say, paracetamol, you'll have all the summarized information on paracetamol, the name, the classification, the contraindications, the indications, the side effects, all those, the drug-drug interactions. That is what we are referring to as the monograph, okay? It contains information on individual drugs, information on dosage forms, indication, side effects, contraindication, precautions, and drug costs, okay? So that by looking at the BNF or even the drug index, if you want to order a drug and you're not conversant with the cost, the drug index will be able to give you an approximate cost of that drug, okay, before you actually source it from the distributor, okay? There may also be sections for prescribing for certain types of patients, such as the elderly, the children, patients with renal, hepatic impairment, pregnancy, and breastfeeding. So these formularies are presented either in paper format, you can have the hard copy, or the electronic format. When you're selecting products to be included in a formulary, there are several factors that are to be considered, okay? These factors include efficacy for the indication. So for instance, when you're talking about treating malaria, the drug you pick must be efficacious. For instance, you're not going to pick chloroquine, and yet chloroquine was, in Kenya, it was discontinued for use in malaria because of resistance. Okay, so you have to prove that the drug you're picking is actually efficacious for the indication. Then side effects, contraindications of individual drugs. You want to pick a drug that does not have bad side effects, okay, for the general populations. You also want to pick a drug that is not contraindicated in so many individuals in the population. If it's possible for you to get a drug that can be used by all your populations. For instance, if you are picking a drug for JQuat Hospital and we can pick a drug that is safe for use in children, for use in adults, for use in pregnant women, for use in patients with liver insufficiency, for use in patients with breastfeeding mothers, that is the ideal drug, okay? You don't want a drug that is contraindicated in majority of your clients, okay? Then interaction profile for individual drugs. You don't want a drug that is interacting with everything. For instance, if you look at the HIV treatment formulary, one of the drugs that was excluded was ketoconazole. And the reason ketoconazole was excluded was because ketoconazole was interacting with majority of the ARVs. Okay, so because of that, they excluded ketoconazole. It is not generally used for treatment of fungal infections in HIV. Reason being that for majority of the ARVs, ketoconazole will actually interfere with metabolism, okay? So because of its inducing cytochrome P450 enzymes, okay? So that is an example of the interaction profile. If you have a drug that has it is interacting with so many of the drugs, you'd rather pick an alternative, okay? Then acceptability to patients. This is in terms of tastes. For example, think about something like erythromycin. Erythromycin is an antibiotic. And one of the things that disadvantages of erythromycin, especially the syrup, the suspension, is that it has a very bad taste, okay? And there's been a challenge in masking the taste of erythromycin, okay? Now, usually this becomes an issue when you're treating pediatrics. So if you can find a product that has a better taste with the same efficacy, it would actually be preferable to the erythromycin in pediatrics. Because you can imagine how parents will struggle, okay? The ease of administration, some patients may actually not accept something like, suppositories, okay? If you can have an alternative, the better. If there is no alternative, then again, as we mentioned in class, this is something that you will have to cancel your patients on. Then formulations available. Don't pick a drug for treating pediatrics and yet there are no formulations available. If you're going to put it in the formulary, ensure that formulations are available, okay? Then general availability, including generic availability. You do not want to have a drug in your formulary and yet the drug is not even registered in the country. So that now, when a clinician has decided this is what I'm going to treat my patient, they come to the pharmacy and you tell them the drug is not registered in the country, okay? Then we also look at usage patterns, okay? You want to pick a drug that is used commonly, okay? People are used to it. For example, if you look at the usage patterns around the country, you find that people are comfortable with certain regimens. People are comfortable with certain drugs. If you pick a drug that the general population or even the nurses are not comfortable with, the drug may actually not be used. So for instance, you may have a drug that that is used IV. Okay. Uh, to avoid, there's an issue, I believe it was Julius who raised it in class the last time we had a physical class. And he mentioned a lawsuit where a patient was given an intramuscular drug, IV, or vice versa, which brought an issue, and he actually sued the facility. When you're picking a drug for inclusion in the formulary, look at the usage patterns to avoid such mistakes, okay? Such that if your nurses are used to giving this drug IV and you have brought an intramuscular drug, ensure that you communicate so that you do not get such mistakes happening, okay? Then we have prescribing habits. It's easier to encourage use of a formulary if it involves few changes in habit, unless the commonly prescribed drugs are less efficacious or more toxic. Okay? So generally, when you get into practice, you will realize that you'll get into a certain hospital and you will find that in this hospital, they have a prescribing pattern. If you come in with the malaria, this is what you'll be given. If you come in with a respiratory infection, this is what you'll be given. If you come up with a new formulary and try to change that people are actually not adhering to the formulary because you have not given them what they are used to prescribing. There's no need to change the prescribing habits if the drug is actually working. If the drug is not working or it is toxic, then it makes sense to actually force the clinicians to stop prescribing it. But if it is working and they are comfortable using it, then we can continue with what has been used before. Okay? Now, after developing a formulary, it's important to manage the formulary, okay? Which there are formulary management systems whereby you're either looking at production, distribution, and revision just to ensure that the formulary remains up to date, okay? Then again, it involves responding to the needs of practice. We want to ensure that the formulary is not cast in stone, because if, for instance, Ministry of Health gets to a point and decides this drug is toxic, it shall no longer be prescribed, and yet in your hospital, you have just stuck to it in your formulary, you do not want to change it, what will happen is that people will stop using your formulary, okay? Or maybe, like the case we mentioned for the anti-malarial, chloroquine got microorganisms acquired resistant to chloroquine. Instead of you changing with practice so that you change to AL, you're stuck to chloroquine, okay? That will be an issue, okay? Then again, in case of changing practice, if there are new developments in the world, okay? And now, for instance, if you look at HIV drugs, you find that there are drugs that, if you look at HIV drugs, you find that the drugs that originally were being used were stopped because of side effects, okay? They basically moved from that, and now patients were changed to other regimens, okay? You need to move with changing practice around the world so that you are not just maintaining certain practice and yet your patients are actually being affected, okay? Then again, auditing performance. It's important for you to audit your formulary to make sure that the formulary is being adhered to, okay? And if it's not being adhered to, you need to find out why isn't this formulary being adhered to? Is it because the drugs have become outdated? Are there better drugs out there such that the doctors are now disregarding the formulary and telling the patients, I'll just write you a prescription, you go and buy from outside, even if our pharmacy is not stocking, okay? So it's important for you to actually be able to work with that, okay? So the formulary management systems for considering inclusion of new drugs, or rather these systems are important for considering the inclusion of new drugs, deleting obsolete and supplying non-formulary drugs, okay? So you basically manage the formulary to ensure that if a drug becomes obsolete, it is no longer effective, you delete it from the formulary. If a drug comes up and it's new and more effective, you have a way of including it on the formulary so that your formulary does not become obsolete and everyone decides we will never use this formulary. Feedback information should be provided to prescribers on their adherence to a formulary to encourage its use. And then so that the prescribers can tell you, we are not using the formulary because this is the reason why, okay? This prescribing data can be useful in both developing a formulary and giving feedback on the performance. So when you are developing the formulary or you're looking at whether your formulary is being used, the prescribing data is very important because you can see these prescribers are not prescribing what is in the formulary. Why? Okay? The why will tell you what you should do with the new formulary. Okay? Ideally, a mixture of methods should be used to encourage the use of the formulary. During distribution, you can distribute either as hard copies or soft copies. You can, if you look at the BNF, usually the BNF is revised, okay, every 6 months. Revision is important to make sure that your formulary is not outdated, okay? And the BNF is revised every 6 months. The drug index revision usually will vary, okay? There was a time they were revising it every 2 years. Sometimes it may take a little longer. So revision should be aimed at and specified at the launch so that we know, like for the BNF, that one we know every 6 months they revise it, okay? Now, sometimes they may revise, okay, and may not print the hard copy, okay? So for you to get the updated, the most up-to-date, you can actually get the soft copy, okay? But every 6 months, they will update so that you know that if you have a BNF that is written 2023, you know that there are actually several revisions that have been done, okay? So when responding to needs of practice, we've also alluded to this. It's important that you actually listen to the prescribers and watch out for what the new developments in the market so that your formulary is not out of date, okay? New drugs are always coming into the market. There must be a method available for showing drugs to be proposed and considered for inclusion in the formulary. There should be evidence of advantages of the new drugs over drugs already in the formulary. You don't just add a drug because it's new, okay? And yet the old drugs are working, okay? If it is new, it should give advantages, okay? The person making the request must be informed whether the drug will be included, and if so, whether any restrictions will be placed on it. Remember, we said there are some drugs that maybe you may want them to only be prescribed by a specialist, or maybe for when they are prescribed, they should be monitored closely. The patient should be monitored closely. So all these restrictions must be indicated. An appraisal period can be suggested, for instance, 6 months, where prescribers gain experience with the new recommended drug. If a drug is accepted onto the formulary in between revision, it's essential to inform all users of the change. This can be done via bulletins, post, or if it's an online copy, it can be adjusted before the printing cycle. When responding to needs of practice, this refers to things like withdrawing a drug from the formulary whose use has come to an end. For instance, the drug can be removed due to cessation of production. The industry that was producing it, maybe they closed down and they are no longer producing it, or a product license has been withdrawn. The drug was registered by PPB, but PPB has withdrawn the product license. So now you have no way of accessing the product, okay? So it will be withdrawn from the formulary. In case of changes in manufacturing recommendations, so for instance, if a drug was being used for children, treatment of children, and now there's a new recommendation whereby it is no longer recommended for use in children, then that drug needs to be struck off the children's formulary, okay? Consider withdrawing drugs if they've not been prescribed for a long time, for instance, more than 6 months. Remember, we said the formulary is useful for stocking drugs in the pharmacy. It will be useful for stock control, okay, or inventory control. Now, if you have a drug that is in the formulary and yet it has not been prescribed for the last 6 months, it's best to recommend it be removed from the formulary so that the pharmacy does not have to stock it. Okay. Then consider how to respond to a request for a non-formulary drug. Remember, we have said that when you're coming up with a formulary, you are going to look at the ailments that are available in your environment. So for instance, we said that if you're in Europe, you're not going to start stocking antimalarials because malaria is a tropical disease, okay? It is generally found in the tropics, okay? So there is no use to actually stock up antimalarials in a hospital in Europe, okay? But remember, once in a while, you will get a solo traveler or a traveler coming from the tropics. They get to Europe, you test them, you actually find they have malaria. What do? You're not going to not treat this patient, because if you do not treat them, the patient will die. So what do? You need to have a way of ordering drugs that are not on the formulary. Okay, so like in that scenario, we have a patient, they have an infection. If this infection is not treated, this patient will die. So what do? We have a way of considering a non-formulary request. Okay, some hospitals will require a form to be filled to request for a non-formulary drug for 2 purposes: as a deterrent for prescribing non-formulary drugs, so that if there is no need for prescribing non-formulary drugs, they don't need to be prescribed, okay? If there is an alternative, the alternative should be used. It also allows to see if any drugs are frequently requested for. The form must be endorsed by a senior prescriber so that we don't have a scenario whereby people are just prescribing non-formulary drugs left, right, and center, and yet the drugs that are in the formulary that are being stocked in the pharmacy are expiring. Okay? So some of the reasons for non-formulary requests, we can have things like a patient needs it, a patient is already on it, or promotional activities from drug manufacturers. This should be limited. You don't things like this, okay? If a patient needs it, for example, the case where we've stated, you're in Europe, you don't usually stock antimalarials, but here is a patient who has come, they traveled from the tropics, they have malaria. This is a patient who must be treated. So we will actually make a formulary request, a non-formulary request. We will ship in the drug for this particular patient, okay? You may have a scenario whereby a patient has traveled, say, from Machakos, they have come to the JKUAT hospital. They were on a drug for treatment of, say, diabetes, and that drug is not stocked in JKUAT, and they are well stabilized on it. We can actually make a formulary request for that, okay? Or we may have a scenario whereby we have a promotional activity from a medical representative, okay? They have come in, they have told you that my company has a new drug, okay? that has been released, this new drug is actually very effective. Okay, so you may have doctors who may want to try it. Okay, again, that can be considered, but it is not encouraged. Okay, so this should be limited. Changing practice. Some prescribers oppose formularies due to wanting freedom to prescribe whatever they want. But remember, as a prescriber, you're guided by the guidelines within the facility within which you work. That is something to be looked into. Okay, most prescribers have developed certain preferences to some drugs, hence changing is difficult. For instance, you will see a prescription, you see a certain prescriber, you look at the diagnosis they've given, they are going to prescribe. So you're sure Dr. A, when they're treating you with there will be augmentin on the prescription, there'll be Panadol on the prescription, there'll be Piriton. Prescribers may actually resist formulary because of what they are used to. Okay, incorporating the formulary into electronic prescribing systems, which restrict the choice or at least highlight formulary drugs as preferred to achieve rational prescribing. It also helps to educate prescribers on the benefits of formulary adherence, and it involves local opinion leaders in educational meetings. So here, when we talk about the electronic prescribing, we mentioned this when in our earlier classes when we were looking at dispensing, where we said is given, they indicate, they prescribe using a prescribing tool, okay? And the tool will only have medicines that are in the pharmacy, okay? Such that if the prescriber is treating an upper respiratory tract infection, what they will pick an antibiotic, okay? Among the choices of antibiotics, only the ones that are stocked in the pharmacy will appear in that the okay. It is important to provide feedback to prescribers on whether they follow the formulary or not. Formularies encourage rational prescribing because remember, when the formulary was developed, the people sat down and decided for this pregnant woman who has malaria is this one. When someone is going to prescribe outside the formulary, it's possible that they may actually not do it rationally. Okay, so that you may end up having a lot of mistakes simply because the person who is going to prescribe outside the formulary is not able to get all the information they need. Okay, so for example, look at if formulary drugs are being prescribed. You look at whether formulary, it means that rational prescribing is happening because you can be sure in the formulary it has been written, this patient who has, they've been first diagnosed with HIV, this is the drug that they're getting. So if that is being adhered to, you're assured of rational prescribing. However, information may not be available on why the non-formulary drug was prescribed. The data should be easy to interpret, accurate, up-to-date, and of direct relevance to the prescriber. So remember we said some hospitals may have a form where they give anyone who wants to do a non-formulary prescription to fill. When they do that, they should indicate on that form why. Okay, is it that whatever is available on the formulary is not working? Is it that that the patient is allergic to whatever is available on the formulary, okay? So that when you revise the formulary, you can take that into consideration. Feedback is important from the prescribers and pharmacists on why they are not using the formulary and how best this can be changed. Requests for non-formulary drugs can also be evaluated. Since formularies are used to manage inventory, lack of adherence can lead to an increase in expiry. It's important that if you have a formulary and you're using the formulary to stock up your pharmacy, it's important that the formulary is adhered to. Otherwise, the drugs you bought will actually expire and the pharmacy will actually incur losses. Okay? Any questions? Okay. So if there are no questions, we will stop there for today.
Excuse me. Yes, I wanted to know whether it's governed globally or locally. I noted that India revised their prescription format for all their healthcare professionals and issued an order to be implemented by 1st of January. Key complaints and clinical findings on the prescription. And they have dictated how it looks like. This is a local, they are normally country to country, or is it governed by the
with regards to formulary, the guidelines. It will give basic guidelines on most of the things. But individual countries have regulatory bodies. They have Ministry of Health. They have, like for our case, we have the Ministry of Health. We have the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. Okay. These boards have they've been given the mandate. Like if you look at the mandate for the PPB, it has all that. It has the authority, okay, to add anything that would make sure that across most countries, but individual countries can actually add to it. Remember when we were in class, we said some countries may actually not to indicate the dose or what you're going to give. It's up to the pharmacist to do all those calculations. They will indicate the disease. The pharmacist will actually do the rest of the calculation and manage that patient. So individual countries are at liberty. Now that you mention India, I believe it was also India last year that gave a regulation, and I believe, if I remember well, it was a Supreme Court indication. I believe there was a doctor who, there was a case in court where the doctor's handwriting could not be read. Okay. And because of that, that ruling stated that if doctors cannot write clear instructions on their, if doctors cannot write okay. So So doctors are able to write clearly. If they are not writing clearly, then they should actually type their prescriptions. So you need to put into regulation, okay, and legislation the requirements for their practice. Remember, we said the key underlying factor here is that safety for the patient is guaranteed. Okay, so like India, probably they got to a point and realized that without this information, if it actually works for India, be sure that different countries. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes, I'm happy. I hope it can work here where everybody are just doing their own things.
Yes.
I wish, and then also I noted they also have very good systems to ensure that that is implemented. I wish
Yes.
our regulators here can help us just have standard prescriptions to
Oh,
be really improve the patient safety.
mhm.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm told you have a practical, and hopefully next week we can pick up, we can finish off, because have a physical class and finish off next week. I'm going to send notes so that you can prepare, especially for the class next week, so that we don't have to take too much time. Okay. So thank you for attending today's class. Have a good afternoon.